Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the evening of UK National Stalking Awareness Week 2020. This is because of the lockdown of the coronavirus. This is the first time that we've actually um, live streamed an event which was originally scheduled to be held at the Scottish Parliament. But with a fantastic team behind us, we've managed to take the event online and onto digital so that everyone can join us. It's allowed us to invite more people onto our event and to celebrate this fantastic day. UK National Stalking Awareness Week was launched way back in 2012, and it was really to bring stalking into the public consciousness. It was to keep stalking alive, to focus on stalking once a year. And this event has grown exponentially over the past 8 years since its conception. Everyone, police forces, victim support services, all mark this event by doing something online. Our aim is to try and eradicate this heinous crime of stalking from our society, to reach out to the victims of this crime and let them know that they are important, that we do take stalking seriously. We have adopted a zero approach to stalking across the UK. And if you are a victim of stalking, we want you to know that even in despite of the coronavirus lockdown, even in despite of the challenges that we're facing within our society, within the current climate, that support is there for you. And all you have to do is reach out and ask for help. We have a busy schedule tonight. As you know, my name is Anne Moulds, founder and chief executive of UK of the charity Actually Against Stalking. The charity was launched way back in 2009 as a campaigning body. At that time, there was no such crime of stalking within Scottish law. It was a crime that was overlooked and often ignored. Psychological harm, psychological abuse, which are the hallmarks of this type of unique criminal behaviour, didn't register on the existing criminal justice system. At that time, victims were having to wait until something happened or there was a material act or a physical assault before anything was done and was recognised. Having stalking introduced legislation introduced into criminal law, which is now UK wide, and actually it's also European wide recognition of stalking, has actually provided that a framework for this type of crime to be investigated and prosecuted. And we want to bring perpetrators to justice. And we have one of the probably the most robust, clear, concise pieces of legislation in the world today. Actually, again, Stalking is a small charity with a big heart and a big voice, and we have been mechanistic in driving forward changes, not just here in the UK, but across Europe, and having this crime recognised, in improving response to victims, in asking victims to come forward and report. In order to decrease the number of victims who are being stalked, we need to increase the number of perpetrators who are being prosecuted for this crime. We have adopted a zero tolerance approach to stalking, and UK National Stalking Awareness Day week, actually, it started off as a day, it's now a week, 2020, is marking the introduction of anti-stalking legislation into Scotland. That's 10 years on. We have been working, raising awareness of this crime, improving response to its victims, making changes, working with the Scottish Government, working with the police, the Crown Office, and other victim support services to make sure that when you reach out, help is available to you. As I said earlier, we have a very busy agenda tonight. We have 2 hours to mark UK National Stalking Awareness Week 2020 to mark the introduction of this fabulous piece of legislation into Scottish law. And also the recognition of psychological abuse and harm, that a victim doesn't need to be attacked or be physically harmed before their voice is recognised. Stalking is a unique type of crime, and the majority of stalkers never issue an overt threat. It's not the behaviours, it's the impact on the victim that is the defining criteria of this offence. And that has changed attitudes right across the country. It has given victims a place and a voice within the criminal justice system. And we have created a platform for victims to stand up and speak out and let their voices be heard. But we didn't do this alone. We didn't. We have been fully supported by the Scottish Government, police, MSPs, the Crown Office, and other victim support services. And for them, we thank for helping make this a success. Tonight, we have some speakers who would like to introduce you to, and I would like to introduce you to Rona Mackay, MSP, who will be speaking tonight. Rona, you may remember, was in the media just recently. Rona has launched a bill, stalking protection bill, with the aim of providing an extra layer of protection for victims of stalking. That bill is still going through the parliamentary process. And we hope towards the end of the year we'll have some more news on that. Rona was very good. She launched a stalking debate last year at the Scottish Parliament to mark UK National Stalking Awareness Day 2019, and has done a massive amount of work in helping raise awareness to this crime and the impact it has on the victims. We also have the Cabinet Secretary of Justice, Huma Yousaf, who has supported our work, has supported our charity in helping, and has done a massive amount of work with victims and victim support services in implementing the Victim and Witnesses Act, improving response to victims, violence against women. Although we know stalking affects all people, regardless of age, gender, colour, or creed, the majority of victims are women. And Huma Yousaf has done an amazing amount of work and is still doing that, working with charities, victim support services across the country, trying to improve response to the victims. We also have Duncan Sloan, Assistant Chief Constable for Police Scotland, again for public protection, helping to keep you safe, helping to keep our communities safe, and working hard behind the scenes with Police Scotland, improving response to victims, listening to victims, putting new systems in place to allow victims to come forward and feel safe in reporting this crime. And we also have our honorary patron, Dame Eilish Angiolino QC. Eilish Angiolini has supported us. She became our honorary patron a few years ago and has helped support this charity, drive it forward. As you know, Eilish, when she was the Lord Advocate for Scotland, she was very big on improving impact for victims. It was on her agenda. And all the work that has been done before us, before Action of Scotland came in the scene, these people were already working behind the scenes, thinking about victims, recognising victims, and they have continued that work and they have continued to support us. Further on into the agenda, we've got some films to show. We've been working in partnership with our University West of Scotland, developing some films, resources to highlight what stalking is, the different manifestations of stalking, how it affects people, the impact on their life. Without the victim's voice, without hearing what it's like to be a victim of this crime, the devastating impact. Stalking disrupts lives, it devastates lives, and in some cases, it actually steals lives. And we hope these videos will be used widely as a resource, whether it's for other victim support organisations to help educate, or whether to help victims themselves realise that what they may be experiencing constitutes a crime of stalking. And I'm now going to hand over to let you see some of these videos. I would like to thank the students of the University West of Scotland, team leader Elizabeth McLaughlin. We have Theo Thanders to thank, Dr. Matt Frew, who have helped shape these videos and bring them to you for use. Just one word, it's the first time we have live streamed
Hi.
using this type of technology, so we might have a slight delay in transferring to our agenda, but please bear with us. We'll use this as our trial run, but I think after the coronavirus, we will realise that the media live streaming onto social media platforms is going to be a very powerful resource that we will all learn and adapt to use.
Everyone, I'm Rona Mackay, the MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you all and hope you're all well and bearing up in these very strange days. I'd also like to thank Action Against Stalking for asking me to virtually host this reception to mark 10 years since the horrific crime of stalking was criminalised. As you all know, this event was supposed to have taken place in the Parliament, which is of course impossible just now due to the COVID-19 virus, but well done to Action Against Stalking for coming up with this inspired alternative idea. So normally when I'm hosting a reception, I speak for a few minutes at the outset just to welcome everyone and then introduce the speakers and outline the format for the evening. So now I'm going to speak for a little longer just to give you the background to my involvement with stalking legislation. I don't need to tell you that stalking is a horrible, insidious crime. It has a profound effect on victims both mentally and physically. And it's a vastly underreported offence, but the number of incidences has more than doubled since 2012. The latest figures show that 1 in 4 young women aged between 16 and 24 have been victims, and that's shocking. Last year, I introduced a proposed members' bill to allow the police to apply directly through the civil court for stalking protection orders to protect victims who reported 2 or more incidences of stalking. This meant that the stress of having to do this at a time when they were at their most vulnerable was lifted from them. We know that many victims don't apply for legal protection because of the stress and the financial cost if they don't qualify for legal aid. The only protection available to victims currently is to pursue non-harassment orders through the civil courts, but this rarely happens for the reasons that I've just mentioned. So after much help from our bill team in the Parliament with the drafting, the proposed bill went out to consultation. Police Scotland, women's organisation, as well as individuals who had been or were still victims of stalking were very supportive. However, some caveats were expressed. It was clear that there was an issue of timing around its proposed introduction. Last summer, I met with Gordon McCready and Debbie Forrester, who work on the front line of detection and prevention of stalking and sexual crimes. They advised me that it might be better to wait until the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act, which was introduced last April, had been evaluated with regard to the effect it had on the number of stalking offence prosecutions. Their worry was that there had to be a clear pathway of support and redress for victims, and another layer of legislation might be confusing for legislators, but more importantly for victims. Now, I understood this entirely and decided to pause the proposal of this bill until this evaluation had been done. In reality, due to the pressures of Brexit legislation and now this terrible COVID-19 situation, it would not have been passed in this parliamentary session anyway due to time constraints. However, please be assured that when life returns to normal, and of course if I am re-elected next year, I will progress this proposal in the next session if there's still a gap in legislation to protect victims. If I'm not re-elected, it's perfectly possible for another MSP to pick it up, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that I'll be able to do it. So we must stem the tide of this insidious crime and send a clear message to stalkers that they will be stopped and prosecuted before more lives are ruined. And we must send a clear message to victims that they will be protected. So thank you for inviting me, Action Against Stalking, and keep up the good work. You do an amazing job, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Hello. Can I first and foremost hope that you're all keeping safe and well? That is the most important concern, no doubt, for all of us at a time of real anxiety for everybody. right across the country. And of course, you'll understand that the government's focus has been and continues to be on the response to COVID-19. All the other work we're doing really has gone on the back burner for the time being. But I think so important to continue the work we're doing in relation to action against stalking, because we know, of course, at the time where we have lockdown measures in place, particularly we know so much of stalking crime can take place in the social media and online space, that actually there could be an increase in incidents of stalking in these times. So really important that we continue this work. But I'm really sorry that we can't be together for this celebration and reflection of the 10 years since the offence came into law here in Scotland. But I'm sure after lockdown measures are out the way and when things return back to normal in the recovery phase, I've got no doubt hopefully we'll be able to get back together again. And before I begin any substantive remarks, let me also remind everybody to look at the links below and click on the links below, which should take you to the Action Against Stalking website, but also to some of the other films that are being made. So let's start with a bit of self-reflection. I think a bit of honesty here, that perhaps the justice system might not have always taken stalking as seriously as it should have done. But 10 years ago, through the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Act 2010, Scotland became the first part of the United Kingdom to introduce a specific law against stalking, with England and Wales then following later on in our nations. That's something we should be really, really proud of. But I'm absolutely clear as a Justice Secretary myself, but of course having talked to my predecessors who were Justice Secretaries previous to me, all of us understand that this is in no small part to the hard work and diligence of Action Against Stalking, and in particular, of course, the Chief Executive, Anne Moles. So let me thank you for the work that you've done, Anne, but also, of course, the organisation has done to advance the issues of stalking and the really detrimental and traumatic impact it's had on its victims. So we should rightly recognise that in the 10 years since the offence. But let's also be honest and say that there's more work to be done. I don't shy away from that as Justice Secretary. We know some of the quite concerning statistics that more than 1 in 10 adults have experienced at least one type of stalking and harassment in 2016-17 and also 2018-19 combined, with the majority of those having experienced an incident, at least one incident, that involves a social media element. And that comes back to my opening remarks, that in these lockdown situation, the lockdown situation we find ourselves in, that actually we could have more incidents, and we could potentially see more incidents of stalking in that social media space where more people are spending time, of course, at home. We know that stalking can have a really detrimental impact on victims, really traumatic impact, and that can be, as I say, exploited by stalkers in terms of harassing online. And certainly that online harassment can also be quite complex as well in terms of resolving those cases. So there's a need for greater understanding across the justice system of how stalking works in practicality, as well as the impacts it can have on victims. And as Justice Secretary, I'm very keen that all the organisations I work with, of course government first and foremost, but also police and others, have that deeper understanding, and working with Action Against Stalking is clearly going to be an important part of that. And the reason why I can have confidence that message is getting through is with my conversations with Police Scotland, including with the Chief Constable, at these times, these difficult times. We're often talking about how we support victims of, be it domestic abuse, but also we know that stalking and victims of stalking may well be fearful at these times as well. In terms of moving forward, well, I was delighted actually to announce in November 2019 for the first time that the Scottish Government will be supporting and funding the work of Action Against Scotland. That work initially enabling Action Against Stalking to develop and deliver training and services to organisations that work with victims of stalking. So again, just increasing the greater understanding of this really nefarious and pernicious crime. I'm also really pleased that we've been able to make further funding available to enable Action Against Stalking to take their very highly successful victim impact box and turn it into a digital online resource. Again, one of the upshots perhaps of the pretty challenging times we find ourselves in is that more and more people are having to adapt to working online and using online resources. So I think this will be hugely welcome, and very much continuing our partnership with Action Against Stalking in the new financial year 2020-2021, providing £70,000. So I hope that demonstrates the government's commitment that we are stepping up to that challenge. Anyone who experiences stalking and harassment deserves to receive the support. And in addition to providing funding to Action Against Scotland, as I have already outlined, we're also supporting the development of the Follow It app by the Scottish Women's Rights Centre, which is designed to help victims, indeed survivors of stalking, to record what's happening to them in a simple and also a safe way. So it's clear that while the Scottish Government, I believe, has moved considerably in recent years in recognising and addressing stalking behaviour, I'm really honest about this. There's more we can do. There's more that we should do, and working with Action Against Stalking and indeed other partners, there is more work I believe we absolutely will do. On the broader context of victims, for me this has been a key issue since taking up the post of Justice Secretary over a year and a half ago. And you'll probably be aware, myself and Law Advocate chair something called the Victims Task Force. We're acutely aware of the crime of stalking and also the effects, and as I say, the really challenging, pernicious effects it has on its victims. And therefore, for me, the Victims Task Force is there to make sure that the voices of victims and survivors is elevated and prominent right throughout the justice process. From the moment that somebody needs support, right the way through to potentially if there's a court date and trial, right the way through to, for example, if somebody who's been convicted of stalking ends up being released, and making sure that support is there for that individual, for that victim who's been so damaged, so traumatised, so impacted by this terrible crime. So the Lord Advocate and I co-chair that. We've met 5 times since December 2018. It will continue until at least the parliamentary term in 2021, and more that we can do with organisations like Action Against Stalking and indeed other organisations that represent the victims and survivors of stalking. I commit myself very, very much to do that. There's a lot we're also doing to improve the experience of victims as best we possibly can. Later this year, I should say, the Victim Surcharge Fund will open. It'll provide immediate and very practical support to victims in the aftermath of crime, for example, for new locks or indeed alarms. And these kind of things, I think, of a practical nature, will be really, really helpful for, again, victims and survivors of stalking. So once that fund begins to accumulate later on this year, we will make awards of grants to organisations, who will then, of course, open that up to individuals to apply for. In terms of other matters that maybe are not directly related to stalking, but could of course have some impact, delighted with Victim Support Scotland progressing their Families Bereaved by Crime service, an excellent example of where just having one point of contact that will navigate an individual right the way throughout the justice system and provide support. It could be hugely helpful, and we're thinking, as well as doing that for families bereaved of crime, how can we effectively do that for every victim of crime? Because that's essentially where we want to get to. A lot of work on parole, and how do we here ensure that the voices of victims and survivors are heard better throughout that parole service, and doing some work on restorative justice. But again, that element of work will not be suitable for everybody. Of course, will always only be voluntary, and of course you can imagine in matters and in areas of stalking and domestic abuse or sexual offences, of course, restorative justice would not be appropriate in many of these examples. So, whatever we do within the justice system, whatever measures we're bringing forward, we'll always do them in consultation and in a great amount of discussion with organisations like Action Against Stalking. So in conclusion, let me just finish by saying that I acknowledge how difficult this period is for everybody, but really I can imagine extremely challenging, traumatic, worrying, filled and riddled with anxiety for those victims and even potential victims of gender-based violence, including stalking victims. So the government is here to support you. If there's more that we can do, particularly in these challenging times, please, as an appeal to Action Against Stalking and indeed other colleagues, to come forward with any ideas on how we can support you greater and indeed support you better. But I'm delighted we've made progress in these 10 years. I look forward to working with you for at least the next 10 years, if not even longer than that.
Thank you for asking me to be part of this event to mark the National Stalking Awareness Week 2020. Police Scotland is committed to working with our partners across Scotland and in the UK to tackle stalking and harassment and bring perpetrators to justice. It is very important for us to take this opportunity to focus on the impact that this heinous crime has on those affected by it, and for us to do all that we can to help them feel safer and to report. We know that stalking has a huge emotional impact on those it affects. It is a psychological as well as a physical crime. Stalking causes victims fear and distress. It impacts on how they live their lives, how safe they feel, how they act and how they react. It's not the same as domestic abuse, although it can often be a feature of it. Last year, out of the nearly 900 stalking offences recorded by Police Scotland, almost 300 were committed against people who were not in a domestic relationship with the offender. Stalking is an insidious form of abuse, perpetrated in the real world but also online. In these unprecedented times, with social distancing, self-isolation and increased reliance on digital devices, the threat of stalking behaviours moving into the cyberspace is heightened. Every stalking situation is unique, but most stalkers demonstrate 4 distinct types of behaviour: fixated behaviour, obsessive behaviour, unwanted behaviour and repeated behaviour. Stalkers might be fixated on and obsessive about another person, and their behaviours towards them repetitive and unwanted. Stalking is stalking whether it's committed on or offline. Victims can be subjected to unwanted calls, texts or messages. It can include hacking into devices and installing tracking apps, taking control of someone's social media profile, or sharing or threatening to share photos, videos or personal information. 10 years ago, Scotland introduced the Section 39 stalking offence. This was as a result of the hard work and determination of many of the people marking this event. Since then, we've had a very clear message for perpetrators. Stalking is a crime. Subjecting any person to unwanted and repeated attention which causes them fear and alarm is criminal and will not be tolerated. Stalking can affect anyone, so it's important that we all look out for the signs and recognise the damage that the 4 distinct behaviours cause. If you're concerned that you may be a victim of stalking, or that someone you know may be a victim of stalking, then please report to Police Scotland either by calling 101 or using our online reporting form available via our website. Clearly in an emergency, always call 999. Further information or advice is available using the National Stalking Helpline on 0808 802 0300. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eilish Angelini and I'm the patron of Action Against Stalking UK. It's a charity that was founded 10 years ago to deal with the dreadful problem of stalking, something which can appear insignificant in its behaviours, can amount to something much more sinister and much more serious and criminal over the course of time. Anne Faulds founded this charity. She remains a backbone, and I'm very grateful to her and to Ryan Hatton and to all the others who have supported the tremendous work that the charity does and ensures that it's still here today to provide the guidance, support and help needed by so many men and women across the country. And I'd like to also thank the University of West of Scotland for providing the ability for us to have this virtual celebration, given that coronavirus has put paid to our reception at the Scottish Parliament to be hosted by Rona Mackay MSP. Nonetheless, we are celebrating. We are hopeful that the work that we do will make a difference.
These are powerful messages from our speakers, and can I just extend a very sincere thank you to all our speakers, to Rona Mackay, MSP, to Huma Yousaf, Cabinet Secretary for Justice, to Assistant Chief Constable Duncan Sloan, and to our honorary patron, Dame Eilish Angelina QC. The message is being delivered loud and clear that stalking is an important issue, not just for victims, but also for the Scottish Government, for the police, for members of the Scottish Parliament, and as you know, for Action Against Stalking. The support is out there, the recognition is out there, and we are slowly coming to recognise how devastating this crime is within our society. Stalking is a crime that exists within our workplaces, it exists within our universities, within our schools, it exists within our communities and within our personal lives. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Scottish Government for their ongoing support, to thank them for funding Action Against Stalking and helping drive forward the work that we are doing in addressing this crime, for delivering support services to the victims and allowing us to work and develop stronger partnerships with other victim support services so that we can make sure victims are directed to the right services at the right time and they get the appropriate help and support when they need it. We're delighted that the Victim Impact Box has been digitalised and will be made a very useful resource, reaching out to a wider audience for those who need it. It was a toolkit that I developed in 2012. It's taken a long time to get it this far, but I am so delighted and happy to see that this Victim Impact Box is going out into the public domain to be used by the people who need it most at the right time in their life. And I would also like to thank Police Scotland for the hard work. We know that Police Scotland work hard behind the scenes. They work under pressure all the time. But over the years, we have witnessed the change in attitudes, the improved response to stalking victims. At one time, victims were unsure about reporting to the police. They were scared to report to the police. They were scared that they wouldn't be believed. They would be scared to be made to feel that they were the one imagining threat when no threat existed. And they were scared that if they reported to the police, that it might trigger their stalker to escalate their behaviours, increasing the danger that they are already facing or making matters worse for themselves. That's all changed. And I commend Police Scotland and the fantastic work that they have done in working with stalking victims, putting in new systems, training officers to recognise and identify early stalking behaviours, and treating victims with the dignity and respect and believing victims when they go forward to report a case of stalking. Without the support of the Scottish Government, the police, the Crown Office, our work would have been so much harder. I would also like to thank Rona Mackay MSP. Rona has supported us constantly over the past few years in helping raise awareness of this crime. The Stalking Protection Bill will be an added bonus for victims. Unfortunately, the lockdown, the COVID virus has delayed the introduction of the bill into criminal law, but it is coming. So any victim who is being pursued by a stalker, this will give the police an extra tool, an intervention to increase more protection for the victim while that stalking case is being investigated. There's a lot happening out there, and it's good that we have National Stalking Awareness Week to help bring you, the public, and victims up to date with all the hard work that is going on behind the scenes. And lastly, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our honorary patron, Dame Eilish Angelini. Dame Eilish Angelini has supported us constantly. She's upheld the work we've done. She speaks out on our behalf. And a lady who set the scene of this type of work many, many years ago when she was Lord Advocate for Scotland, even away back at that time before there was any stalking legislation in place or psychological abuse had been recognised the way it is now. Dame Angelini had already recognised that reforms had to happen within the criminal justice system to try and aid the victim's journey through that process, to try and reduce the impact. And we are proud and delighted that we are able to carry on that work that she started so many years ago. So once again, may I thank our speakers tonight for joining us on UK National Stalking Awareness Week 2020 and supporting the work of Action Against Stalking. Thank you. We're now going to move on, and there is going to be a question and panel session starting very, very shortly. But as I said earlier, the students of University West of Scotland have been working, can I just say, for months on developing a series of short films to highlight what stalking is, to try and demonstrate the different manifestations of stalking and the impact that it has on the victim. As I said before, we've got to keep listening to the victim's voice. They are the ones that are receiving this crime. They are the ones that are experiencing the damage that's being inflicted on their lives. Once upon a time, victims were often told, you must do something to deserve this, or you must be imagining things. Surely that can't be happening. We only have to listen to what victims have to say to realise that what they're saying is true. Stalking is a devastating crime that can have detrimental impact on every aspect of a victim's life. It creates fear, it creates anxiety, it creates uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen and when it will ever stop. Victims have three questions. Will I survive this? And what will happen to me? Will I be physically attacked? How long will this go on for? And what happens if it stops and starts again? Our work with victims over the past few years, and my own experience of being the victim of a stalking campaign, has highlighted that the uncertainty never ever leaves. The trauma can last for years, long after the event has finished. It's the unwanted, persistent nature of this crime. A person who has forced their way into your life without your consent. And even though you didn't want it, and there is no way you can stop it. Stalkers are relentless and they don't give up. It depends on the type of stalking you're experiencing. It could be an ex-partner who's angry that you have finished the relationship, and the stalking starts as a means to try and reconcile you back into the relationship. Or maybe they're angry that you've had the courage to leave that relationship and they're going to seek their revenge in you and disrupt and destroy your life as much as possible. It could be someone, an acquaintance or a stranger, who's taken an unhealthy interest in you. They maybe feel that you are the person that they want to spend their life with, or that they're entitled to have this relationship with you, even though you barely know them and you don't agree. The stalking will start as a means of trying to groom you into a relationship that you don't want. These stalkers are relentless. They have little regard to the fact that you're not interested in them. Some of them hold a delusional belief that you're meant to belong together and that you have a long future together. It's distorted thinking, but nevertheless, the damage and the impact this has in your life can be quite devastating. It could be a revengeful stalker, someone who's taken an unhealthy sense of injustice that you have in some way caused them harm. It's a perceived sense of harm, a perceived sense of injustice. And they're out to seek revenge in you and get their own back. Again, it's distorted thinking, it's delusional. And they will do anything to cause as much damage to you as possible. It could be the predatory stalker. It could be someone you know. It could be someone who is a complete and utter stranger. Stalking can occur online, offline, or both. The predatory stalker, sometimes they stalk children. We're trying to strengthen the links between stalking and child abuse, the sexual predatory stalker. We know that stalkers are out there using dating sites, trying to groom vulnerable people into relationships. We know that there's financial fraud. We know there's identity fraud. And we know that the advancement of technology has provided new ways for stalkers to track, locate, survey, and make contact with the victims. When I first launched Campaign Action Scotland Against Stalking in 2009, and when the legislation came into force in 2010, at that time, technology and cyber stalking and the use of mobile phones to stalk was not an emerging threat. The past 10 years have seen that change, and the police are working hard to try and keep up with it. It has made our job more difficult, and victims who are more vulnerable than ever before, because we need the internet. We need the internet to conduct our lives. We want to engage in our social platforms, keep up with friends. We use our internet for our work activities. But we also have this on the dark side of the internet, where we lay ourselves more vulnerable to the unwanted attentions of a stalker. Please visit our website, actionagainstalking.org, because we offer information, advice, and you'll be able to contact us on our support page. If you are experiencing unwanted attention from a stalker, we are here to help you. There are other helplines on our website. We have Victim Support Scotland, we have Women's Aid, Rape Crisis, the Susie Lamplugh Trust National Stalking Helpline. Police Scotland have their own stalking reporting form. If you are being stalked and you don't want to go down to the police station, which is very difficult given the lockdown situation, Police Scotland have launched an online stalking reporting form. You just need to fill it in and someone will be in contact with you. We're going to hand over now to some of the videos that the University West of Scotland students have produced, especially for this day and as a resource online. I'd like to extend my thank you to them for the hard work, the months that they have put into this, in doing this. They made a fantastic job, and I look forward to allowing you, our audience, to enjoy these videos.
She soon started to receive flowers to her house, with cards enticing her to come back to him, promising her the world, and when she refused to respond, he began to call 10 to 12 times a day, initially professing his love but becoming threatening if she did not return to him. He would wait outside her house or report on her activities to make her aware that he had been following her.
It tends to be until a person's adult, they're not being stalked, they're being bullied or harassed. So we've got this conceptual confusion, what's bullying, what's harassment and what's stalking. And we've raised this at many levels, asking, well, why? Why is stalking an adult problem when actually it's very much a young person's problem?
Annie believed that the stalking would never stop. She did not really think that therapy would help. She never felt safe, and she believed that she would one day be a statistic on a homicide report.
A proposal for a members' bill, which I was bringing in my name.
Yes.
And it's a bill which would introduce stalking protection orders in Scotland to victims of stalking during the criminal process.
Victim Support Scotland will support kids over 12 and we'll also support the parents and guardians of kids who are under 12. So if somebody presents as a victim of crime and they're under 12, the parent guardian will come to us and we will give advice, give information and look at signposting for specialist support.
Hello and welcome back to another Minecraft War video. After last episode when Sword left us, a few days later
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Wyan Hatton, and I'm the chair of Action Against Stalking. I hope you have enjoyed the streaming so far. What we are going to do now is to start a panel discussion, but we really would also like you to send any questions you may have into the various social media platforms that you're using now, and we will do our best to bring those questions in, time permitting. What I would just like to do is to make sure you can all see my colleagues on the panel, in addition to Anne, whom you have heard speaking. If I could just ask him to say no more than a couple of words about who they are and a bit of their background, so that at least you can have some familiarity. So if I can perhaps invite, just in the order of them appearing on my screen, first of all, Pamela Orr, would you just like to say who you are, where you are from?
Sure, yeah, Ryan, thanks very much. My name is Pamela Orr. I work in the University of Glasgow. I work in a service that focuses on early intervention around student mental health. I have some experience as a psychotherapist and counsellor working with victims of stalking, and I'm working along with the charity to try and raise awareness and understanding around stalking and stalking behaviours, and what we can do in terms of promoting that.
That's great. Thank you very much. And next one, Adrian, would you like to say who you are and where you... Right. We had a little glitch there, but notwithstanding, we can keep moving. Mandy, how about yourself?
Hello, my name is Mandy Yule. I very recently joined the board of Action Against Stalking. My background is as a speech and language therapist, and then as the manager in health and social care for many, many years. Latterly, I worked as the chief executive of the Esher Hospice, and I retired from that position last year. My great interest in this charity is really around the scope of what has been achieved and the potential for the future to bring services to so many people who, as Anne has told us, are subject to this heinous crime of stalking. I'm hoping to bring my experience of working with a different type of charity to the table to support Action Against Stalking. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. And Kevin. Kevin? Kevin, would you like to say who you are? We're not getting Kevin.
Yep.
How about, oh, hello.
Fine. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kevin Quinn. I'm one of the trustees for Action Against Stalking. Been involved with them for 2 years. A background, I'm a retired police officer. I've known Anne for about 14 years. And through time in the police, also after that as a child protection coordinator in South Ayrshire. We've done projects to try and raise awareness and understanding, particularly for young people, and done that in conjunction with South Ayrshire Violence Against Women Partnership. Lots of work to do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Kevin. And I think, Adrian, your mic is now working.
It is. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm a trustee of Action Against Stalking, a recent trustee. I'm delighted to be involved, and I'm also a victim, a past victim of stalking. I was stalked for 18 months, and can kind of bring that experience of having been a victim of stalking, hopefully, to the work of the charity.
That's great. And last but by no means least, can we ask Dr. Matt Frew? And I think quite a lot of people also have seen you before on TV and at our last conference, Matt.
Yeah. Yes. Hello. My name is Dr. Matt Frew. I'm a futurologist of digital social and transformation tech. I don't know how well it's actually coming across here because of the feed, but as you know, I work close with Theo Thanidis, who's the guy behind the scenes here. And really, one of the ways that we're involved here is through looking at how stalking is really in the cyberspace is really becoming increasingly the place that most stalkers, actually move. I mean, 90% of all stalking has at least one element of cyber involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my background, but I won't bore you. We can talk about it.
That's great. So, ladies and gentlemen in the public, that's a very brief introduction into our panel. We have quite a number of questions and topics we would like to share, and we've already been receiving some questions. So I'll try my best to group them into some logical order and see how it goes. And quite a lot of people, Anne, are really, really keen to get a better understanding on why you are so passionate about giving the victims' voice heard, bearing in mind not all audience are coming in today, and indeed people who could be downloading this YouTube streaming after the event this evening may not be familiar with your own background. So I think it'd be really useful to understand why you've been so passionate about getting the victims' voice heard.
It was after my own experience of being the victim of a stalking campaign, and at that time there was no such crime of stalking within Scottish law. And whenever I tried to report to the police, this person who stalked me remained anonymous. And for 2 years, I didn't know who was stalking me or why this person had chosen to target me. But he was of the typology of a sexual predatory stalker. And I was receiving very disturbing, very sinister letters through the post, items of women's lingerie, very sinister and deviant, sexually deviant photographs of a person who had a fantasy, an unfolding fantasy of rape, bondage, and torture. It was probably one of the most terrifying times of my life. And every time I tried to report to the police, I was never believed. And I was always being told that he would have to attack me first before anything could be done. And, no matter how many times I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get people to believe that what was happening to me was real and to believe the impact in my life was devastating. It wasn't just the anxiety or the fear, the uncertainty, because it was the majority of victims tend to know who their stalkers are. So my stalker, because I didn't know who it was, meant it was everyone. I didn't know whether this person was following me, how he knew me, but he knew more about me than I knew about him, let's put it that way. And every time that I tried to tell people what was happening to me, I met with glib responses. Oh, you must have been out there, attracting the wrong kind, or you're imagining something, or you're a strong person, or why don't you get a dog? And it got to the stage that I get fed up. I get fed up trying to tell people that what was happening to me was real and the impact this was having in my life, and I needed help. I was drowning, and because people couldn't understand it or didn't recognize it, it's like taking away the lifeline of help for me. And eventually, it wasn't just the impact in mental health, it was my physical health. It was because the two are interrelated. We can't separate physical from mental from physical health. And I lost my hair was falling out, I lost weight, I had sleepless night, I was suffering nervous exhaustion. My business was slowly going down the drain, my work performance, every aspect of my life was slowly crumbling like a deck of cards. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. And whenever I asked for help, there was no one there to help me. when it comes to the victim's voice, when I engaged within the criminal justice system, I recognised that victims were more of a piece of evidence support the crime being committed against the state, and yet I was the victim. I was the person experiencing this crime. I had a right to have my voice heard, to tell the court what it was like for me and how the damage on my life, and to this day, my voice has never been heard in a court of law. I felt it was important because stalking is a victim impact crime. It's the impact on the victim that defines the defining criteria of the seriousness of this offence. And we had to find a way that that victim's voice could be heard, that their fears, their harm, their pain could be listened to, believed, and acknowledged and taken seriously. And that's why I have worked hard in driving forward that awareness of the victim's voice and creating a platform so that victims can come forward and have their voice heard, that they can feel valued and they can feel validated, that they are important. And that's because these are all the things that I didn't feel.
That's great. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. And I'm sure this is now why the audience who are not aware of your background know why you are not just so passionate, but why you actually understand how best to support them and advise them, and indeed their families, friends, and even in the workplace where people do not have the experience. And I just wonder whether you can, again, help us set the scene before we open it for wider discussion and pick up some other questions. It's so in terms of your own voice and wanting to do something for victims, in setting up Action Against Stalking, it is now several years on, 2014, it became formally a charity. So what does a charity actually do in supporting victims? Because I'm sure, again, a number of people out there watching this show this evening are not familiar, and that might be one reason why they are watching it, to get some understanding on how we can help them as victims, and indeed professionals in different organizations can also support them better.
Yes, when I launched the campaign Action Against Stalking, the charity was a progression of that, because at that time it was to have stalking introduced into criminal law, took the campaign to England and Wales, and then took the campaign across Europe, where stalking was introduced into the Istanbul Treaty or the European Convention to fight violence against women and children. So it became an international campaign. It was also mechanistic for the introduction of the Scottish Government's Victims and Witnesses Act into Scotland. That was working with other organisations as well, and that provided a set of statutory rights for victims who were going through the criminal justice process. So we had there was a lot of objectives to achieve. And by 2014, we'd more or less ticked all the boxes. When stalking was, the legislation was introduced into stalking and came into force in 2010. I actually was the one person that probably didn't celebrate, because that was the end goal. But once that legislation came into force, it was passed by the Scottish Government, I realised that a piece of paper means nothing. It only was a piece of paper. And the journey had only started, the hard work had only begun. How do we ensure that that piece of legislation is implemented into practice? And how do we ensure, or how do I ensure, that people, the police start to understand what stalking is? So it was the start of another journey with a new set of objectives that had to be achieved. And that was the hardest part, is having stalking recognised and having that legislation implemented into operational practice. So by 2014, these objectives I felt had been achieved, and I couldn't keep doing this on my own. I couldn't keep funding a piece of campaigning work on my own, because I didn't receive any funding that time. I paid for it all myself out my own earnings. At one time, I had 3 jobs to keep this going. Such was my belief, such was my passion. It wasn't that change had to happen, it needed to happen, it must happen if we are going to offer these people the protection that they deserve. So by 2014, I realised that we'd set the groundwork, the foundations were in place, and it was time that Action Scotland Against Stalking, which it was called at that time, went forward as a charitable body, brought in a good board of trustees, and transferred into a service delivery organisation. That we are the only charity in Scotland. We're one of the main charities in the UK. We have an international recognised voice and a platform. So we were the right people to take forward this work, to deliver training, to upskill other organisations, to raise awareness, to help inform policy and guide forward the changes that were required to provide an effective response to these victims of stalking. We will continue to fight against stalking. We have adopted a zero tolerance approach, and we will continue to represent the voice of the victim as part of our work of charity. We also operate a through care service for victims. It's crisis intervention. If anyone contacts us who's experiencing stalking, they're struggling, they feel maybe the police haven't recognised it, they're just maybe looking for advice or information, we will support that victim, we will advocate on their behalf, and we will signpost them to other victim support services where relevant if we feel that they need the ongoing support. So we have many strands to this charity. We are raising awareness, we're delivering campaigns, we're developing projects, we are delivering training, upskilling other organisations, but at the heart of it, we are there for the victims when they need us most.
Great. Thanks very much, Anne. That's really helpful for particularly people who are not aware of what we do and come across us for the first time because of the event this evening. And because this is the 10th anniversary of the legislation and we have branded it 10 years on in our celebration, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from our other panel members to get a little insight into what they see is different now. What is the landscape now? Because we've got people from different backgrounds. And I think it's also very interesting to know from people who are new joining as trustee, because you are not as familiar as some of the rest of us, and particular. I think your perspective on how much or how little do you know, because that actually also guides us to say what we need to do more of in the future. So I think from the panel, what is some of your take on the landscape now on the various fronts? Whoever wants to unmute first can have the first go before I pick somebody.
Well, I'll dive in since nobody else has. Obviously, the first thing is for us, I mean, like as I said, Theo and the guys who are behind the scenes there, running the technical feeds online, the very fact that we are here is a demonstration where stalking is going. Basically, we talk about stalking being a big part of it being on cyberspace. Well, with lockdown, I mean, just recently, there's a report just put out there about how the lockdown has actually enabled or actually accelerated cyber stalking, and or accelerate stalking offline as well. So it's definitely going to go there. I was just speaking, fun enough, to the Victim Support Europe yesterday. So we had a good conversation at Victim Support, and they're trying to do a report into what cyberspace and how cyberspace is exploding. And it's going to explode more because we are searching for a new normal. The world as we know it, the world that you used to have, is pretty much gone, guys. And we're going to change to this new world. Now, as I'll explain to Victim Support, the same with cyber stalking, if you think about it, before the lockdown, before COVID-19, if you can imagine the pond of cyberspace was like this. Since we've all went into lockdown, cyberspace has expanded like this. Everybody's moved up into the cloud, and the stalker has not gone away. Actually, there was a very good one. We actually talk about a stalker pandemic. That's what they're talking about now on cyberspace, because of how it's all accelerating online, and as Anne rightly pointed out, about I think it's 70% or whatever of stalkers are ex-partners, who go in there, and we also know that 96% of domestic deaths have an element of stalking associated with it. So when you think about that, and you think about domestic violence, I think a number of us has heard this online about domestic violence, how it's went through the roof, obviously within this lockdown period. So on the one hand, me, Theo, the guys at University of Western Scotland, when we talk about digital, social and transformational technologies, and think of the students like Dervla and Sophie behind the scenes, it's a big thing for us because it's businesses are going to be moving online, but it's actually providing a very lucrative space for cyber stalking. And I'll finish at that because I don't want to go into basically the virtual space, but some of the other guys can jump in. I'll just mute my mic.
That's great. Thanks very much. Let's move to the next one. Hi, Pamela.
Hi. Yeah, I think actually following on from what Matt was saying there in terms of the digital space and how cyberspace and, with the impact from coronavirus and lockdown, and that impact it's so much more important now, if not whenever that we increase awareness of stalking and understanding the mental health impact, the impact on the individual, and gaining an understanding of what that actually looks like. So the more information, I guess, we can get out there, the better for individuals in terms of the negative health outcomes that are associated with the impact of being stalked, whether that be a lack of concentration, anxiety, depression, stress, impacts in self-esteem, confidence, and linking that to working with counsellors and psychotherapists, because as a result, a positive impact, I guess, as a result of coronavirus is that a lot of counselling and psychotherapy is going online, and there is more money being implemented into mental health, charities or organisations in relation to stalking. So I think the importance of increasing awareness and understanding, and also from my perspective around education, so working in a university, understanding the importance of getting that message out through education, through training, so that staff and students, regardless of what subject they're studying, have that understanding of what stalking looks like, as opposed to maybe a confusion around perhaps cyberbullying, etc. And understanding the differences there.
Your mic's not on, Wayne.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for that prompter. Thank you, Pamela. That's really, really helpful, because what we also know is within the university college campus setting that there's a much higher prevalence of stalking than within the community. So in addition to the mental health issue, I think it's really important, perhaps we can pick up that point within the university and college sector. And I just wonder if Kevin might just like to come in with a couple of observations, simply because Kevin is one of the trustees who has been attending the Scottish National Stalking Awareness Group, which Anne Moat set up a number of years ago on a multi-agency basis to bring together key people, including Susie Lemplou Trust from England, to get a more cohesive approach. And I just wonder, Kevin, from your perspective, in terms of that group, and again, because it's a few years on now since that set up, is what might be your take and in terms of some of the things that's going on that is moving forward on more a collaborative basis?
Ryan, thanks for that. I think reflecting on what we've heard so far, one of the points I'd maybe go back to is the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, who has acknowledged the progress we've made over 10 years, but recognises there's much more to do. And within that context, in the Scottish National Stalking Group, we've got the key agencies and services, including police, who are providing support to victims of a whole range of crimes, from domestic abuse to rape and sexual assault, but who recognise that stalking features in many, many, many of the cases. So through the group, there is a recognition that working together, we can also share the learning, the understanding, and promote the understanding to ensure that the victims get good quality support when they need it. One of the elements around that is raising awareness and understanding of young people. So we've spoken tonight about the universities, and the collaboration that we now have with the University of the West of Scotland is phenomenal, and it makes inroads into raising awareness and understanding, not just for victims, but we also need to reach out and challenge perpetrators within that. And that will be part of the work moving forward to make sure that we've got a consistent and cohesive quality response to give people the help they need it when they need it.
Great, thank you very much. And I saw Adrian nodding there when Kevin talked about we really need to raise more awareness, get messages out to perpetrators. Adrian, might you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, sure. It's maybe worth saying that although I'm not representing Police Scotland, I work for Police Scotland on the communication side of things, and I think the thing that I'm passionate about is educating. You know, as Pamela was also talking about, is raising awareness. I knew nothing about stalking myself before I myself was stalked, and I think one of the things, I mean, Anne talked about it as well earlier on, that it's a very insidious crime. The stalkers generally are highly manipulative personalities and very, very clever in trying to control their victims, either control their access to the victims or trying to control the behavior of their victims in lots of different ways. And that's why people often take a long time to report, because you're made to feel that you're the one in the wrong. You're made to feel that you're imagining it, all these kind of things. And I think that one of the things that I really want to do is help people understand the different components of stalking, and also the ways to respond to it, what to do and what not to do, because stalkers can be very, very difficult to negotiate with, if not impossible to negotiate with, and it's why you know, kind of structured response to stalking behavior is really, really important, because if you let it go and you let it slip, often the stalker will just keep going and keep going and keep going. And as Anne talked about, the impact on your own mental health and your own physical well-being can be devastating.
Thank you. And I know we've questions just come in through one of the media streams. And Kevin, I think you spotted one on online stalking in young people.
Yeah, Jacqueline, thanks very much for your question. You know, you're asking about young people, kids spending more time online, especially during lockdown, and wondering about messages about safety. There's a variety of good resources out there. For me, though, the best one is Internet Matters, which gives a whole range of information about different types of good quality advice for parents and for young people. We'll stick up a link on the Action Against Stalking website to there. But if you Google Internet Matters, the online world, and some of the other guys, Matt and Theo, will talk about that. It's a great resource. It's a great place to be. It should be a safe place within that side of things. But it goes back to the point I was making earlier on. We need to be able to reach out with parents, the young people, and to others, to make sure that young people are growing up and know and understand the importance of positive, healthy relationships. Because if we can get that message across, it'll start to reduce instances of stalking, it'll reduce incidences of domestic abuse, or other of the perverse crimes that happen, in particular to women and girls.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And I know Anne wants to come in on a point that, on the back of a point that Adrian's made. Anne?
Yes, I think it's just to add to that conversation, because the one area we don't often talk about, and it's maybe something we need to start thinking more about, is I was thinking back to my own experience of being stalked. And you know, I had a daughter at that time, and there are victims out there who have children and they're fearful of their own children, but that child within the house or children within the house, and actually watching what's happening to the parents and the impact on the parents, maybe the increased anxiety, the parents, whether it be their mum or maybe their dad, whoever, maybe have attentions elsewhere, they're experiencing the fear, the anxiety that's happening within that house. And I think it'd be nice if my daughter at some point would speak out on this. What was it like for her being the child at that time when her mother was going through this experience? Because I can look back now and just say, actually, I forgot all about her because it was all about my fear, my concerns. Now, she went to uni at that time, and I know she was scared for me, and I know she was worried, and how did that impact on her? And maybe that's an area we need to now start to think about. You know, what does it feel like if people have, you know, these victims of families? What's happening to the families? How are they coping with this? Because we can look at secondary victimisation as well, and maybe that's an area that we need to maybe put a bit more time into. So I really just wanted to add that in and maybe open that up for further discussion. And if there anyone is out there who as a young person and you're experiencing your parent, one of your parents being stalked, living in fear, or you know something's happening, you can also reach out to us and ask for support. We don't just support the victims, because we know that it will be affecting you as well, and you might be scared, you might be worried, you might not understand what's happening. So do reach out to us and contact us if you are a young person in that situation.
Great, thanks, Anne. And I think it'll be really useful to spend a little more time later on the different types of not just victims, but the secondary, the collateral damage, as it were, because there are a lot of service gaps. In the meantime, though, I wonder, Mandy, whether you'd like to give us a bit of a take, because I remember when we were really, really keen that you joined the board because of your significant range of expertise and experience, especially running such a successful charity in Ayrshire. And I remember one of the things you said that you really wanted to get involved, help, but actually you did not know and could not find out a lot about stalking, even though there are different things you can Google. And it feels to me that actually, in terms of the general awareness in the community, whatever sector, that there still needs to be a lot of work done to raise awareness. And I just wonder if you can just share a little bit of your own view of the lack of insight out there in the community, which might actually be experienced by a lot of people.
I think it's really interesting that everyone will have a sense of what stalking might be about. I thought I possibly understood it better, certainly, than I did. And I think that if you look at every soap opera, every film on Netflix, there is quite often some sort of stalking type behavior being apparent, and people are suffering, and we're all watching that and perhaps learning that there are different types of behavior, and that people aren't going crazy if they believe that something's happening to them like that, and that they are suffering as a result of it, and those around them. So I feel that my ignorance is perhaps fairly representative perhaps of the majority of the population. If you haven't been directly involved in something like this, it's really so shocking when you begin to understand the depth of the insult, if you like, to people's lives and to their sense of safety. And I believe that everyone should be able to feel safe in their own home or in their workplace or wherever they go with others. They need to feel safe. So there's a huge opportunity for ongoing training, and we've referred to some of the training materials that are available through our charity and through other similar charities. But there's also a huge opportunity for research, and that's something that can affect all of us, not only in this country, but other countries. And the more collaboration that Kevin was talking about, then the stronger we're going to be and the more progress we can make in coming up with solutions to deal with this type of issue in our society. And I think the achievements of the charity have been exceptional against the odds. We've come to a place where we have now got a platform to work with others to really explore this in a way that collaboratively we can make huge strides. So that's my take on it, Wayne.
That's great. Thank you very much. And it's really important for the board to have that balance of people who are so au fait with the topic that we sometimes can forget, not deliberately, but naively can just forget there are so many components out there. And that brings me to perhaps come back to Anne, because again, when I joined the board a few years ago, I was certainly not familiar with stalking. And even when I told my friends that I was involved in the charity in stalking, and I would get some funny looks and say, "Oh, you mean the four-legged kind?" I said, "No, I mean people." So, and one thing I really learned from Anne in the early days, and it's really shameful that I don't understand a lot more. It's like a lot of people, I thought, stalking, it's primarily about women being stalked by men, that these are primarily sexual predators, but now about, cyber stalking children. But actually, I learned from Anne and from other experts that there are a lot of typologies that certainly did not jump to my mind. And I just wonder, Anne, can you just perhaps educate us and some of the audience who are like me a few years ago, extremely naive about the types of stalkers and the types of associated crimes that stalking could be related to?
Yes, so what I said earlier was stalking is quite a unique crime. It's a nebulous type of crime. It seems to sit everywhere, but pigeonholes nowhere, which is why we've brought it together as a charity, as a singular standalone offence within the legislation within Scotland. But when we're looking at stalking, it's not a unitary construct. Stalking manifests itself across so many other different forms of serious criminality. And we're looking at ex-partner stalking. Now, although the statistics are saying primarily women, and the large majority are, men are also stalked. We are contacted at our charity by quite a few men who are being stalked, quite a large majority of being stalked. And that could be an ex-partner, that could be their ex-partner, a female. We know that women stalk men stalk women stalk women, and men stalk men. It is a gender-neutral crime. So anyone can fall victim to a stalker regardless of what age they are, who they are, or what gender they are. And men are not represented fully in society. We appreciate and we certainly support violence against women. And we work with all these different strategies and platforms, but we must also recognise that men can also become the victim of stalking, and their lives can equally be destroyed and disrupted. I've had men who've lost their businesses, men who've lost relationship, men who are thinking of committing suicide because of what's unfolding in their life. And so we must also represent men when we're talking about stalking. So we're looking at the ex-partner stalker. That's synonymous with domestic abuse. Now we have women who have maybe dated someone for 2 or 3 weeks and then decided the relationship's not for them, and they've left the relationship, finished it, and there is no history of abuse whatsoever. It's just as soon as that relation ended, the jilted partner can't accept that or may be angry. We have women who have been in domestic abusive relationships, and the stalking is a continuation of that. We have stalking underpins a wide variety of other crimes like bullying. If we look on a continuum basis, what can start off as bullying can then move into fixed, focused attention that actually would constitute stalking. You know, we hear it on the internet or we read it in the papers, young person bullied to death. No, when it gets to that stage, you can be rest assured they're not being bullied any longer, they're being stalked to death. And it's recognising when it crosses that line that stalking is a subspecies. Bullying is a subspecies of stalking. We're also looking at forced marriage. If a woman tries to escape or she doesn't escape because the threat's there, if you leave us, if you run away, we will get you, we will hunt you down. I had a lady, it was a while ago, and she ran away from her family from England to Scotland because of forced marriage, and she dossed around for 3 years, keeping her head below the parapet, because within that community, if she brought her head above the parapet, she would have been hunted, stalked down for in the name of honour. And she contacted us asking for help. She wanted her life back. She wanted a job. She wanted somewhere to live. She was fed up sleeping in friends' couches everywhere. So we have to look at where stalking underpins all these different crimes. Now, when it comes to physical violence, when it comes to rape, when it comes to homicide, the stalker is usually prosecuted for another crime and the stalking element's overlooked. I remember a victim that said that her partner, when she tried to split up from him, he arrived at her house one door, forced open the door and raped her. She never reported that to the police. But he then pursued her relentlessly for another 7 months, stalking her. He damaged her car. He was just an omnipresence in her life. She was scared. She was uncertain. It was the stalking that drove her to report to the police, not the rape. She said, as bad as it was, the rape lasted for 2 minutes, but it was the 7 months of stalking that impacted severely on her mental health. When she reported to the police, they overlooked the stalking and they went for the rape, and he went down for 4 years for rape. And she was angry because the stalking was acquitted. It was dropped within the courts. And what she said, I didn't report rape, I reported stalking. I wanted him done under the stalking offence because that was what damaged my life, not the rest of it, not the rape. So we've got to recognise where stalking fits within these other crimes. But it is a standalone crime. Stalking is stalking. And just because it belongs to other crimes or it fits under other crimes, it's the stalking element that we must address because that is the precursor. We're looking at human trafficking as well. The human traffickers are these predatory stalkers. They're out there looking for human beings to exploit, either into the labour market or for young girls and women into the sexual market. And what they do is, it's about supply meets demands. So they stalk them, they groom them into these relationships, they groom them, and then they disempower them. And we know that there is new research coming out that for the human traffickers, these organised crime groups of gang stalkers, how do they stop their victims running away? Well, they tag them, they chip them, they watch, they survey them, they're stalking them regularly to find out what they're doing. And they're told, if you run away, if you do anything, that coercion and control, these threats, we will kill your family, we will do this. So stalking just infuses everywhere. it's in gang stalking, community hatred crimes. So what we're seeing is that stalking covers that wide gamut of all these other crimes. But if we recognise the stalking element, that is the preventative message, that is the preventative work that we can do. We don't want people to be hurt or physically attacked or raped. We want the stalking element recognised in the early stages and for victims to report. But we also need to strengthen the link between child abuse, bullying, cyber harassment, and what stalking is. And it seems that as far as young people are concerned, they're either cyber bullied or cyber harassed, but they're never cyber stalked. They're either being bullied or harassed, but they're never stalked. And we know that young victims, young people, stalking is every bit as much a young person's problem as it is an adult problem. So why are we not using the language that they need to understand? Let's educate them about what stalking is. Let's educate them about stalkers, because there's no point in saying, well, when you're a young person, you're going to be cyber bullied and cyber harassed, and when you become an adult at the age of 16, oh, why, let's change this to stalking. So we really need to get that into the young person's lexicon about, what a stalker is as well. So we've got a lot of work to do in that area. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you, Anne. I think it's really certainly helpful that it's not a narrow, but it's very wide range. And because you talked about the cyber stalking and linking to child abuse, I wonder if we can bring Matt Frew back in to the frame. Matt is a bit of a guru in cyber stalking. He was one of our key speakers at our 2019 UK conference on cyber stalking in November last year in Glasgow. Matt, could you tell us a little bit more about the different types of cyber stalking and what we can do to perhaps protect ourselves or people we know? Matt, your mic's not on. Matt, can you switch your mic?
I thought it was on there, yeah.
Yeah, start again, please, because it's so sensitive, these buttons. Thank you.
I'm hitting Control D there, so therefore there you go. Me telling everybody to hit Control D. Well, the first thing is when you talk about cyber stalking, you're talking about willful, repeated, malicious harassment on an online context of another person. That's a very broad definition of a cyber stalker. But also the thing is Kevin earlier on was chatting about children, especially right now in lockdown. So you're getting a lot of young kids who are clearly bored to tears. They're locked down, they can't go in, they can't do anything. But you actually have what we call stalkerware or spyware. They actually also call it as spouseware. And these are just powerful surveillance technologies that allow us basically access to your phone, and we can install this software. It can be done very, very easily. And you can record the messages, the screens, their GP locations. They can get their phones, their camera. You can literally track everything. Now, we've got tons of these kind of spyware that's out there. I mean, you've got Ghosty, which was one, Mobile Spy, Phone Sheriff, Tech Shield, and all these kind of things, which were originally designed to protect the kids. So it was linking to Kevin's point. People are worried about what their kids are looking at. And it's not just for kids, we use it for loads of things. Anne was just saying there about people who are, let's say, getting trafficked, and for the sex workers and stuff like this, and these horrible crimes. Mm-hmm. These technologies are used in people's phones, and as Anne was talking there, I should say for the audience, about chipped. We do literally mean chipped. In the same way as people chip a dog, you can chip a human being, and you can find out where they are, and you can track them. So the thing is we can use all these things, and they're often used. These apps are used, like I say, Spy Worker, and Spy Tracker. These are supposed to be designed, believe it or not, so people can keep an eye on their employees, and they are sold as a good thing. So they sell them and say, no, this is to watch your kids or it's to watch your employees because you're suspicious of them. But of course, stalkers got a hold of them and they put them on people's phones, etc., and on their devices, and they can actually track them. So it's really, really important that the audience understands how easy it is to have this. Now, one of the ways that you can do it is if you're a bit worried about that, you can download a thing called Root Checker. Now, Root Checker will actually check if your root files are being corrupted, and it'll tell you if there's anybody in your phones. And you'll get a lot of advice from a lot of cyber experts saying to you, well, firstly, make your content private. Don't go on social media, is what they'll say to you. And the other thing is don't overshare. Now, the thing is if you're talking to young people, they would look at you and think you're crazy, because that's what they do all the time. So the first thing is to find out is has someone been following you? I'm sure lots of people have thought about, you probably had a Snapchat, because Snapchat had a feature called Snap Maps, which is designed, and Snap Maps is designed to see where your pals are, so you can see where your pals are locally. But there's been stalkers. I think there's one young chap in Bournemouth was convicted because he was using Snap Map to stalk his ex-girlfriend. And he knew where she was and what she was doing and stuff, and then he could, turn up and all that kind of stuff. So it's useful that people understand when we talk about stalking and where it's going. And as Anne was actually saying earlier, people need to understand how big this is. In America alone, you have 1 million people will report stalking. In America, that's just America alone. Stalking is a global problem. It has economic impacts, health impacts. Right now, when you think about it, and that's why government's so important. When people are stalked, as Anne was explaining earlier on, people actually, it's detrimental to their job, detrimental to their physical, their mental well-being. That then puts a strain on the mental and the health services, just as we've been told about the issue with COVID right now. And that's really what we need to really get through to people. And I think it's almost in America, I think it's like 400,000 men are stalked a year as well. That's just in the States. So we've got a global problem. It's a pandemic now, as I was saying earlier. You have a pandemic of stalking that's taking place, and it's only going to get worse. And as I think, as you guys know, cyber stalking is going to shift into the virtual reality spaces next. As I think when I was at the conference, I was arguing this is where it's going to go. So we're at a time when, to be fair, Ryan and everybody else, our police are undermanned, under-equipped, and under-resourced to deal with this. And the research really needs to be invested heavily in. And if we don't do that, but people need to understand how it impacts health, employability, it crashes with economy. So it's a huge thing. It's a big deal. And if you think of the kids, it's going to move increasingly online. It's going to be bigger. Okay.
Can I add on to that as well? Is it okay just to come in this one?
Please do.
Is that, yeah, because what Matt's saying hugely, I mean, this is hugely relevant because, the FBI in America reported at any one time there are between over 500,000 and 750,000 sexual predators online at any one time out there looking for new victims. Now, when we're looking at the increased use of the internet, we're looking at technology-assisted stalking in whatever means, then the predatory stalker used to be the lone wolf of the stalking world, and they were very much limited by their physical environment. But the internet's changed that now. And it's allowed for this creation of an online community where these predators can communicate, they can barter for the victims, they can share their photographs. When we held our conference in 2019, we heard about the dark web and how that's accessible to some of these more tech savvy type of people. Now, we're working with Victim Support Europe as we speak. We partner with Victim Support Europe, we support the work, and I know that they're supporting the work that we're doing. And the big drive just now across Victim Support Europe is the recognition of cyber stalking as a threat. It's not even an emerging threat. And when the Istanbul Treaty, the European Convention to Combat Violence Against Women and Children, was ratified in 2014. Now, just to put in context, Section 34 of the Istanbul Treaties has actually specified that stalking, European member states implement stalking legislation into criminal or civil law. That's a European-wide treaty. It's a legally binding treaty, and it's the recognition. Now, what it doesn't mention is cyber stalking, because even in 2014, cyber stalking was not an emerging threat, even at a European level. But Victim Support Europe are now working on cybercrime, the increase in cybercrime. It's been an explosion. And we're part of that story, and we must also work with our international partners on helping address cybercrime in all its manifestations, with stalking being the main one. Because stalking underpins most of these other crimes. And as Matt quite rightly said, and it was released, and there is a YouTube video called M-Spy, and it's about the spyware for mobile phones, for monitoring staff and making sure loan working arrangements are safe, etc. And yet you can buy M-Spy to put into your phone for £25. So there's all these tools out there for stalkers that aid and abet their stalking. So it's a growing market, it's a growing medium, and we're going to have to be ahead of our game if we're going to meet this head on.
That's great, thank you. And I just want to pick up an earlier point from Pamela, if I may, because I did say I would come back to more the campuses, the education area, because the statistics do show that the prevalence is higher in the student community, the more adult student community. And I just wonder if you can give us a feel of what that looks like, and perhaps what more Action Against Stalking, and again working with other agencies, partner organizations, can do to help overcome some of those problems.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it probably links back to what we were speaking about earlier on in terms of increasing understanding and awareness of stalking behaviours, what stalking actually looks like, whether that be, like we said, cyber stalking or physical stalking, and increasing our understanding in terms of the educational aspect of training. So, looking at the training that we've already started to develop in conjunction with UWS, but trying to implement that training in a user-friendly way to the student community. So bearing in mind, there's a large percentage of students who are coming from international countries who maybe have virtually no understanding of mental health, to be honest, or impact on mental health, or culturally, have lack of insight in relation to the impact that stalking could have on their mental health. So working collaboratively with universities and colleges to have that user-friendly interaction for students, to gain that understanding and increase that awareness, and have that really clear link to, this is an unacceptable behaviour, this is a crime, this is the impact that it's likely to have had on an individual's mental health and well-being. What type of resources are there in the institutions, through colleges and universities, to support students if they're experiencing stalking? Because once people recognise that they are being stalked, that then very much could set about a train of events to get supported. So making sure that that support is there for students, because like Anne spoke about earlier on, and Adrian as well, that the poor health outcomes and the poor mental health outcomes and the impact that has on the student's journey, the student's experience, the self-confidence, their self-awareness, relationships, health, well-being, it can be catastrophic. So ensuring that universities and colleges really start to educate students on the impact, what stalking is, how to recognise if you're being stalked, and what resources are actually available to you as a student to be supported, whether that be through counselling services or other community organisations.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And something's popped up as a question, and it's about community safety. And I wonder if Adrian can help us there. It's in terms of the community rather than just the victims themselves. What is some advice we can do or give to even the community to raise more awareness, including for families, to how to spot perhaps some of these behaviors? And Adrian, you know, from your work and campaigns, some input from yourself?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing that I would say, probably the most important thing, is providing support to the victim. If you know somebody who thinks they might be being stalked or is experiencing behaviours from another person that they're finding deeply upsetting, they need support. They need an ear. They need somebody to listen to them. Because one of the kind of characteristics of a stalker is they will try and isolate their victim and try and make it appear that they're imagining what's going on or they're misunderstanding it or whatever. So you need to be open-minded and listen to that person, and also help them document what's happening to them. One of the things that if the behaviour is serious enough for it to be reported, and you know a lot of the time it appears not to be, but actually it should be reported much sooner. The police need evidence. They need you know, a diary of what's happened and when it's happened. And if you're supporting somebody who's experiencing stalking, helping them by giving them advice to do these kind of things can be really, really useful. You know, if you know somebody who's being stalked, you can also encourage them to report. Can report to police. You can report at a police station, obviously, once the lockdown is over. You can phone 101, or if you really feel that there's an immediate threat to life, you can phone 999. And as Anne said earlier, you can also report online on the Police Scotland website, which is scotland.police.uk. And there's an online reporting form there in the contact section. You can also learn more about stalking and what the types of behaviours that would be classed as stalking, and you can share that information with people you know face to face, or you can share it online on social media. You can highlight, you know, behaviour that is inappropriate. If you see somebody who's behaving inappropriately and you feel that they've crossed a line, you can call them out on that and make it very clear that that's unacceptable. And then separately, you can also get involved. You can get involved in fundraising for charities like Action Against Stalking that are working to challenge stalking and to support the victims of stalking. And you can also talk to your political representatives, particularly your MSP, in terms of supporting legislation that's coming through, encouraging them to fund organisations like ourselves. You know, there's lots and lots of things that you can do, but most importantly, educate yourself through reading online, going to the Action Against Stalking website, going to the Police Scotland website.
That's great, and I think on that quite positive and quite a lot of helpful advice note, I'm mindful of the time. That we're not far off the 8 o'clock finish, but that I really have enjoyed listening to the different aspects and the panel be able to pick up some of the questions that came through. And I think that last point on some very practical things ourselves we can do, and whether we're the victim, potential victim, or just within the community, it's really helpful. And if people do want to have more insight and get much more familiarized, we Action Against Stalking is launching in a few weeks' time a suite of 6 awareness raising videos. I know Police Scotland has also got one out a week or so ago. There's a lot of resources there, and we will be putting a lot more on our new website. So encourage people to look at not just ours, but there's quite a raft of other victim support organizations, and indeed some are more focused on stalking. So thank you all very much for your various contributions. And certainly if there are other questions coming in, and because of the time limit, we are not able to pick these up immediately, what we will endeavor to do is to respond to those, provided we know how to get back to the different people who have raised this. So first of all, I just want to thank the panel, but I do want to check in good practice if anybody has a very final point to make within the 1 minute I have left for the panel discussion. Anybody? Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that we're still open for business during this unprecedented times. So if you need help, support, reach out to us and we will help you.
Great, thank you for that very, very important reminder. And particularly, we've picked up from the Susi Lempulu Trust press release that particularly with the lockdown, that their data shows victims are still being stalked. And I know with the work that Anne is doing, supporting victims, the numbers are going up. So it's really important that people come to us and other organizations for help and advice. If we can't help you, or we know somebody who is better placed, Anne and her team will certainly be giving you the right direction and guidance. So panel, thank you very, very much. And to the audience for sending in a number of the questions to make this quite a rich discussion. So on this point of the evening, I would like to pass back over to Anne, who will come in and just say a few words to close. And indeed, apart from her usual closing remarks, she'll also be making quite a very exciting announcement. So Anne, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I could wait for this bit because we have just received exciting news. It's a project that has been on the table for the past few months, and to actually receive this email, I think probably about 4 o'clock this afternoon, that we have confirmation of our new partnership with the University West of Scotland to set up an international centre of excellence for stalking and cyber stalking. This is going to give us the opportunity, for research-driven projects, for new research. We're very aware of the lack of research out there, but for Scotland to lead the way and setting up this international stalking, cyber stalking and interpersonal violence centre of excellence with UWS of Scotland is absolutely amazing. So that is our exciting news, which I'm so delighted to be able to share with our audience tonight. Scotland is leading the way in stalking. We will continue to lead the way in stalking, and we will continue to fight this insidious crime that exists within our society. Can I say a huge thank you to everyone for joining us tonight, in particular to Rona Mackay MSP, to Assistant Chief Constable Duncan Sloan, to Cabinet Justice Secretary for his, what a wonderful speech, and so great to have the Scottish Government support. Humaza Yousaf, thank you so much as well. We also want to thank our honorary patron Dame Elish Angelina QC, who has supported us, and of course I think I said Rona Mackay, but also thank you to the Board of Trustees who have supported this charity, who keep this charity going. This charity belongs to the Board of Trustees. I am an employee of this charity. So can I just say, what a fantastic board. Thank you for your support, your ongoing for support, making all this happen. I want to thank you very much to the comms team who behind the scene has made this event possible. This is the first time that we have ever taken something online like this. This is new for us and it's been amazing. So to the comms team behind, to our teammates, Theo, who is behind the scenes orchestrating all this, helping make this happen, can I just say one huge thank you. This is a call to action. It's a call to action. UK National Stalking Awareness Week 2020 is a call to action. That we keep raising awareness about this crime. We work together as a team, services across board. We put out that outreach to victims and we keep fighting this crime to eradicate it. We have taken a zero tolerance approach to stalking, and that message must be delivered to all these victims. We know that stalking is still an underreported crime, and we hope that victims will come forward and report. 10 years since the legislation has been in place, 10 years of the offence of stalking. The changes have been phenomenal. And what's happened, it seems to have triggered a new way of thinking about psychological abuse, psychological harm, about the impact of crime. It's given victims a voice within the criminal justice process. But we do struggle to raise funds. Every charity needs funds, and we work hard to keep this work going. We keep hard to offer the support to victims. We work hard to deliver on that quality service that we have spoken about. And we are asking people to dig deep into their pockets, you know, £10 for 10 years. Let's start the Just Giving page. Please support this charity. We are stopping lives being harmed, we are stopping lives being destroyed, and we are stopping people from being murdered. So if you'd like to support the charity, please go to our website, www.actionagainstalking.org. There is a Just Giving page, and any donations would be gratefully received. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. To everyone that has helped make this happen, make this successful, and to a fantastic board of trustees that helps keep this charity running. Thank you.